Welcome back to the full app walkthrough series. So we had last left off with this awesome little app stack switcher we've been coding here, where we had an auth stack and an app stack that we toggle between depending on if we're logged in or not. We're going to be doing another major refactor to our app today, and it's going to be including a Bottom Tab Navigator. So that's like on your phone where you have the bottom tabs you can toggle between. Typically they're like 2 to 4 items that you can toggle between that are separate screens. That's different from a stack navigator and can be a little bit confusing to include in our current code base. So I'm going to take you guys through step by step to figure out what we need to do. The goal here is to have a tab appearing as a footer at the bottom of our screen that allows us to do the blog and blog details view, and the other tab will give us another screen entirely. For example, it might involve maybe where we post new blogs. We are going to go ahead and just try and make some text appear on a screen and navigate and make the footer bar work correctly, the bottom tab navigator work correctly. But in order to do this, I'm going to have to do a little refactor to my app container.ts. I'm going to want to use the React Native Elements icons because on that tab navigator, I don't want just text. I'm going to want icons appearing on it. And if I'm going to be using some kind of TSX component like React Native Elements, I'm going to have to convert this app container into a TSX file to make sure TypeScript does not yell at me for having some kind of TSX component in a non-TSX file. We're going to, in that case, have to cancel our bundler. I'm going to go ahead and just close out my application on my simulator. I'm going to close my bundler. I'm going to make sure my terminal is clear and not running anything, because when you mess with file extensions, your code will not like you. Your bundler will not like you. So if you're going to do any major refactoring like this, I highly recommend going ahead and stopping the bundler and restarting it if you have any errors that say cannot find module something, right? I also made this very simple screen template. It is a basic little class test that extends React component class that allows us to have some navigation options with the header title, and also allows us to have this just basic little test screen text appear in the middle of the screen. It's just a very, very basic component that's I'm going to attempt to wire in to our stack to make sure, or in our tab to make sure we have something we can navigate to and test with. It's very simple, nothing really to it. So with that little app container.tsx done, we need to do a couple things. If we're going to be writing any kind of component logic or using any kind of component whatsoever, we're going to need to have React in scope. So we're going to go ahead and import that. There we go. Ugh. I'm going to go ahead and enter some new lines between these import statements here and clean it up a touch, because we're going to have to add one more to this mess here, which is called a create bottom tab navigator. We're going to bring that into our import statements for React navigation. And while I'm up here, I'm also going to go ahead and import the icon component from React Native Elements. And because we're going to be using this guy to show our icons in our tab navigator, I'm going to have to make sure I have React and I have to have this guy ready to go. Now there's going to be a couple refactors. Honestly, our auth stack is going to stay as it is because it's good to go. We don't need to add any tabs to it. Our app stack is also, believe it or not, going to be staying the same way. We still want it to have an all blogs view and a single blog view that has those titles and headers and starts on all blogs with these header themes. What we are going to have to create, however, is our tab navigator that will actually encompass this app stack. So here we go. Let's go ahead and create our const, and we can call it maybe our blogs tab to signify this is our blogs tab navigator. We are going to create a bottom tab navigator, and just as always, this guy is going to be a huge catastrophe of various object curly braces. Oops, wrong hotkey, meant to auto format there. So like I said, I always like going ahead and playing it safe and creating exactly what we want to do here. So there's two things we're going to have to worry about. First off, we want something in our tab that has to do with blogs, and that is going to be our app stack. So the set of screens that our app stack represents is going to be exactly what that blogs tab represents. Then we need some other tab to test with. I'm going to call it test for now. And if I included the screen test like that, right? So I'm going to have to import test either one way or another. So let's go to the top here and do import test from screen template is what I called it. I am going to run into a problem here where I will not have a header because the bottom tab navigators do not have these header styles. So if I want a header and eventually maybe some screens have to go with test, maybe this is like a user profile screen that can have a couple different stack navigations available for it. This is going to be my post blog screen and eventually, but we're going to call it just test for now. And I'm going to show you guys a trick. Like what if I wanted my test tab to have its own title? But before I get there, let's see if we can get at least the tabs showing up as expected with some extra configuration. Now, the very confusing part, at least for me, the first time I tried doing this, was how to include dynamic information for our tabs. So we're going to have an initial route name as usual. I'm going to call it blogs, so I want to go to my blogs tab here. And we're going to have something called default navigation options, which you've seen before, but this one's going to be a little bit different than normal. It's actually going to be a callback function where we're going to be pulling off a navigation piece of state. If I can learn to spell navigation. And it's going to be pulling this information as well as using it in some form or fashion. So default navigation options will have a callback where we're pulling navigation in. And it's going to have another property called tab bar icon. And this tab bar icon will have a couple different things on it. Let's go ahead and grab one of them that I know off the top of my head called Tint color. And it needs to return some kind of icon component. There we go. And the icon will need a name, a type, and possibly a size and color. And this is where we're going to go ahead. This is like the minimum you're going to need to get moving here, so to speak. We are going to say, this is how we're going to dynamically generate when our tab navigator builds our icons for each tab of currently blogs and test. So we're going to do a let. We're going to have to pull our route name property off of navigation.state. And that route name will actually, if I can learn to spell, that route name will come from blogs and tests. And this is how we can test what screen we're currently on, or what tab we're on currently. And with that information, I can set some kind of icon name variable to be a blank variable at the moment. And we can wire up some kind of if statement here, where we can say if the route name is equal to the string blogs, we want icon name to be RSS. And this is a font awesome icon name I know of off the top of my head. Otherwise, we can have an else if, a switch statement, maybe yet another if statement. You can do it whatever way you want to differentiate between these guys, you can do so. But I'm going to do just an else if statement and say icon name will be equal to maybe what was one of mine new off the top of my head? One's called code, just a demo. You can go find your own icons as well using the React Native elements and React Native icon, things like that, or React Native vector icons. So we can say our icon name, which has to be a string. So I'm going to put this in a template literal here and say use the variable icon name to determine the name of the icon. I know I'm going to hard code a particular type in my example that's going to be font awesome, since I know some of those icon names off the top of my head. There we go. I'm going to have a size as well. And if this is getting a little bit verbose, I'm going to go ahead and break apart some of these properties on a new line to try and make it a touch easier for you guys to read. And just to be safe, I'm actually going to wrap my return in a set of parentheses just to make sure that this vertical spacing I'm doing here doesn't break anything on my return statement. We're also, beyond type, name, and size, we can specify something called color. And this color, you don't know where it's coming from yet, but it will make itself obvious in a moment. We're going to say that tint color property we're pulling off is going to be a string for the color of this icon when we click on it. That actually sums up how you do customized icons for tabs in your tab navigator. Now we're going to go ahead and come down here to where our default navigation options callback ends. I'm going to add a comma because we have a second set of stuff called tab bar options. And this is where you're going to deal with an object again. I told you this will be a mess of parentheses and curly braces, where we're going to give it an active background color and say that's going to be 43005B, which should be my dark purple, I believe. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy that right there. That's been like that purple vaporwave color I've been using so far. I'm going to say I have an inactive background color, honestly, of the same thing. I'm going to make the active and the inactive color the same thing, and you can mess with these in your own applications to see what kind of cool color schemes you can come up with. And I'm going to specify something called an active tint color, meaning I'm currently on that tab. I want the icon, the tint color of the icon to be white, as well as the text of the tab name. And I want an inactive tint color of maybe gray, so you have this visual that'll be grayed out that we're not on that tab currently. Cool, that should actually round out some of the basic information you're going to need to customize your tab bar. Tab bar options has typically to do with colors and font and showing icons or showing labels. This default navigation options with a callback with navigation, and this tab bar icon is the standard way of adding icons to your tab navigator. It took me a while. This is almost a identical replication of what you can get out of their React navigation documentation. It just took me some time of finessing it and learning about the .tsx so I can use my React Native Elements icon component along with a couple other things to get actually up and running. So my struggle for the previous night and a little bit this morning is y'all's benefit. We need to now wire in this tab somewhere, and we actually are going to be doing it down here. Instead of app stack for my app, I'm going to say use the blogs tab, Bottom Tab Navigator. So hopefully if my auth loading confirms to not go to the login screen, it should go to my app, which is my blogs tab, which will have a blogs tab at the bottom. To the right of that, we'll have a test tab for my test screen component. And over here in this app stack is what my blogs tab will have, which will have exactly what we had before, that dark purple header with all blogs and single blog available on navigation. So with this redone now, my bundler's closed, my app is closed, and we're going to run this terminal and let this guy build, and hopefully we will have a tab navigator and nothing breaking. I have my debugger open and available on another monitor here in my setup. So I have that hooked up and ready to go to look for any kind of errors or warnings or any console log tests I might want to do. I'm going to open up my app and give it a shot. And check that out, y'all. We have the tab navigator. So we have confirmed login. I still have the same token in my async storage available, so I automatically go to my blog screen. I have my blog's header. If I click on single blog details, I still get them. However, now I can actually switch between tabs, and my stacks remember where you were. Meaning, if I now go to the test screen component, there we go. It loads the test screen component, that little template I had up and running here. But you'll notice there's no header bar. Maybe you don't want one, maybe you do. I'm going to go ahead and continue this exercise to show you guys how to include one. But if I go back to my blogs tab now, it remembers I was on the single blog screen, and I can still navigate back with my back arrow to go back to all blogs. And I can now switch between two tabs, one of which is a stack, and you can actually convert this test screen component to be another stack if you so desire. So how do we go ahead and build out our header if we wanted one on this test screen component? Well, the easiest way I found out through some Stack Overflowing is to create another stack navigator for our test screen. So I'm going to say test screen key will be another create stack navigator, which will be another set of, you guessed it, curly braces and parentheses. Where inside of here, I'm going to have my test screen be the same key and screen name. So it'll be test:/test. Then this is where I'm going to go ahead and hit auto format, and I'm going to have my curly braces where I have been doing exactly what I've done before on my other stack navigators, where I'm going to say I want this header style to have a background color of that dark purple with a font weight of bold and white color. I'm just going to literally copy that right there and paste. And with any luck, this little refactor now should allow us to maybe refresh our code. We still have blogs, we still have blog details. Now if I go to my test tab, boom, we have our header available to us with the title test that's being pulled from a override in my test screen template, where we do the override static navigations option title. You could also do that in here if you wanted to keep this code a bit cleaner. But if your stack got very complicated, sometimes it's easier to do these default stylings here rather than doing them on every single screen. It's up to your preference. But hopefully this little refactor has shown you guys how to include all the crazy stuff you can do in your React applications. All these things you take for granted when you're messing with a mobile app, you now have to figure out how to do. So going through things like Etsy, which I know has a tab navigator and a stack navigator built into it for search screens and conversation screens and things like that. Hopefully the connections on how all these screens tie together is beginning to form. So for you guys' homework, and if you're a part of our curriculum in Gravity as a student, your homework in your lab is going to be to take this test screen component and try and make a component instead for adding a new blog. I'll see you all in the next video where we look over what I did to get my blog up and running. I'm going to show you a cool feature called a picker where we can have our drop down of categories that you would have on your mobile blog, on your desktop blog site, how to convert that drop down into something usable in React Native. So I'll see you all in the next video soon enough.